I said on the overall prospect ranking video that I definitely trust my wide receiver talent evaluation at the college level more than I trust my running back evaluation skills, and that is true. So that's typically why I value wide receivers more. I have not run any of these wide receiver prospects through my prospect model, so we'll just go through these rankings based off of film right now. Starting out with our first tier, and I think he belongs in his own tier, Jordan Tyson of Arizona State. This guy I really do believe is much better than Cardinal Tate is, and we'll discuss Cardinal Tate of Ohio State here in a little bit, but I compared Jordan Tyson, didn't compare him on purpose, but some people probably took it as me comparing him to Ja'Marr Chase. What I said and what I meant was that he's a poor man's Ja'Marr Chase. The way that they used him in Arizona State was very Ja'Marr-esque. He was great after the catch. He does have great athleticism, but obviously it's a tier or two below Ja'Marr Chase because Ja'Marr is one of one. He's a little bit bigger than Ja'Marr Chase, maybe standing at 6'2", 200 pounds. And while I wouldn't call him a route running aficionado, he can run every route in the route tree, and he's very physical at doing it. That's kind of why he reminds me of Ja'Marr Chase, is that physicality. He's got strong hands, great body control, ball skills, 50-50 ball ability. Those are all very high end. Wouldn't say he's the fastest, but he does remind me of Ja'Marr after the catch. He's creative, he's physical, he can beat man coverage and zone coverage very easily. I do think Jordan Tyson is going to be my favorite dynasty rookie prospect in 2026. Now, dropping down to that next tier, I've still got Cardinal Tate at number 2 after rewatching the film of both him and Jacobe Lane, but I will say it's very, very close. Cardinal Tate, the reason I lean towards him right now is because he's an Ohio State prospect. And Ohio State, they just constantly are churning out great wide receiver talent every single year into the NFL. So he's 6'3", 195 pounds, and this guy definitely does play to his size, which is something I appreciate because not always do you see a big wide receiver playing to his size. He's got great big catch ability and those strong hands. Those are the first two things that really jump off the screen to me watching him. He's an excellent deep ball player with that 50-50 ball ability. The size and the frame do enable him to box out defenders very often, and while he doesn't strike me as a Jackson Smith-Njigba, Garrett Wilson type of player where he can basically run every single route in the route tree, the physical gifts I would say are similar to someone like a Brian Thomas Jr. type of player. The sideline grabs are excellent because he has the strong hands and the really good body control, but I will say, he does leave a little to be desired over the middle of the field and with the run after catch ability. That's why I don't really view him as a Garrett Wilson, a Jackson Smith-Njigba level of prospect coming out of college because he does leave that stuff on the table for me. I wouldn't call him a superior route runner either. He really does strike me as someone who's going to be someone's really good number 2, their physical number 2, rather than someone's wide receiver 1. And when I look at Jacobe Lane of USC, this guy actually, I think, can be someone's number 1. And that's why I'm actively debating putting him above Cardinal Tate at some point. He's 5'11", 195 pounds. Obviously not the physical specimen of Cardinal Tate, but Lemon's very interesting because he comes off as more of a slot fit with plenty of speed and run after catch ability, but he does have a very physical element to his game that most slot wide receivers do not have. He was used plenty on the outside at USC, but he seems like more of a slot guy in the NFL. But I'll tell you this, his tackle breaking ability is where he starts to really remind me of a guy like Puka Nacua because he's very physical. And much like Carnell and Tyson, I wouldn't call him a route running aficionado, which is kind of what a lot of slot receivers are at the NFL level, but he definitely is good at doing it, and he's consistently creating separation. He, in my opinion, and this is where I can see myself putting him over Cardinal Tate, I think he can be someone's PPR machine in the right scheme, but I also feel like it's going to take the right fit to truly maximize him. I don't think he could go to any team and have success like a Cardinal Tate can. That's the only reason he's below Cardinal Tate as of this moment in time. Now, of course, guys, these are just my top 12 wide receiver rankings, and of course, we're going to have more Dynasty rookie rankings on the site right now, but if you just want access to my full top 320 Dynasty rankings at this moment in time, you can go ahead and do that by getting an outfitter subscription at fsroundup.com. We've got all my Dynasty rankings fully up to date right now on the site. We're going to be adding IDP potentially if you are an IDP player. And we also have our trading post that's very similar to Keep Trade Cut, where we're trying to get the Dynasty values from everybody. And the 5,000th vote on the site will get a free team breakdown, a Dynasty team breakdown from me. So go ahead, get yourself acquainted with my site, fsroundup.com, and have some fun on it as well. We've got a lot of great Dynasty features. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got Denzel Boston out of Washington right now at number 4, and I do think, again, there's definitely potential that Elijah Serat definitely could rise above him at some point. Denzel Boston's 6'4", 209 pounds. He does a couple of things very well. He's a big possession receiver who can run everywhere on the field and basically make every single catch. I would say the hands on this guy are probably his strongest feature. The tough 50-50 balls, the underthrown balls, the easy balls, he does very well in the red zone. He can basically catch everything that's thrown to him, which is definitely a good skill that translates to the NFL. He seems durable enough to me and physically talented enough to be a possession receiver for anybody in any scheme. I do think that stuff translates to the NFL. I wouldn't say that he excels at any single thing, though. And that's where I kind of get lost a little bit with Denzel Boston, is I don't love the route running, and I don't love the separation ability, and he just seems to create most of his separation physically. And that's typically something that doesn't always work in the NFL when you're going up against more physical corners like Pat Surtain, like Christian Gonzalez, like Derek Stingley. Those types of guys, you have to do a little bit more than just using your pure physical gifts by getting open and creating separation that way. He's not that fast, and while he does flash great vision on punt returns, like when they had him return punts, he actually was pretty good at it. I wouldn't say he's elite after the catch. When I look at someone like Elijah Serat, though, I actually have a lot of interest in this guy for a couple different reasons. So he's 6'2", 209 pounds coming out of Indiana. So if you're watching this on Monday, which is when the video comes out on the day of the championship, you'll have the chance to watch him again against Miami tonight. And I know wide receivers who typically run really good slant routes, they get deemed as slant boys, and they're kind of clowned on in the fantasy community. The truth is, though, a wide receiver who can run a good slant route, they do very well in NFL and in fantasy football, because it basically says I can get separation on basically any single coverage and on any single route. So Rat can definitely do more than that, but he does very well on those routes. He excels on the sidelines, he excels down the field and over the middle, but his ball skills are really good. This is something that I really appreciate from Elijah Serat. And the route running, I would say, is very much well above average. I would say that most of the time that I've evaluated wide receivers over the years coming out of college, good route runners who can run a full route tree, they typically become target hogs in the NFL, regardless of speed. And he is not the fastest guy, but I think I'm going to end up liking Serat more than a lot of people will in the Dynasty community because of those types of skills that translate at the NFL level. And then Jacobe Lane at number 6 to round out this tier. This guy is another USC product. He's one of the bigger wide receivers in the draft at 6'4" and 200 pounds. Now, I'll be honest here, I don't typically love wide receivers that are this big because a lot of times they struggle to create separation. And I would say it's relatively rare to find a wide receiver of Lane size that can break off routes and create that separation. He does that, and that's why I'm very intrigued by Jacobe Lane. In man-to-man coverage, he can create separation using his feet, not his physicality, which to me is a very translatable skill to the NFL because, once again, you're going to be taking on tougher, bigger corners that are more physical, like Christian Gonzalez, like Pat Surtain, for example, and you need to be able to have something else to your element of a wide receiver rather than just your physical traits. And that is a skill that I covet the most when you can separate with your feet. He's also great in space after the catch, which, once again, not very typical for a wide receiver of his size. He can also do the stuff that most taller framed wide receivers can, such as burn you deep with their long strides and beat you on contested balls. So again, he's doing the things that you would want from a bigger wide receiver while also combining some of the wide receiver small guys, some of their skill sets to his overall game. Typically, you do not see many receivers at his size as true fantasy monsters, so the odds are against him a little bit. But I do really think he can be a relevant fantasy contributor for a long time with the propensity for big explosion games. Think of someone like a T. Higgins type. And I know, once again, I'm not trying to compare Jacobe Lane to T. Higgins, but I do see some of that skill set in Jacobe Lane. Now, dropping down to our next tier right here, I think it gets interesting here, because I think I'm lower than most people on Concepcion out of Texas A&M. And it's not because I don't like him. It's just because I like a couple guys better than him. And I would say that Concepcion, this is the type of guy that I think will succeed in the NFL, maybe more so than in fantasy football. He's 5'11", 195 pounds, and he definitely gives me the Jaden Reed type of vibe, which is a very good thing because I was big on Jaden Reed coming out of college, more than most people were, and he's done mostly well from a fantasy perspective. The guy's playmaking ability, it definitely jumps off the screen. From tough athletic catches all over the field to his moves in space, even creating scores on punt returns. This is a guy very much like Jaden Reed who did punt return very well for his team in college. These are all very valuable traits in the NFL, and I'm not trying to put him down a peg because of those traits. He also has enough size to translate that ability to the NFL. It's not like this guy is 5'8", 170 pounds or anything like that. He's definitely got the size that will do well in the NFL level. I would say from a pure receiver perspective, I don't see him being a team's number one. His route running is not that polished. Not that he can't get there, but it's not very polished right now, and he doesn't consistently beat press man coverage. His skill set is when a team gets him in space, and he gets motioned quite a bit. Again, all of that is good. Translatable skills to the NFL, I definitely think he has those. And I do think of him as the type of guy that can have great stretches in fantasy football and these blow-up games. Again, like a Jaden Reed type of guy, but it won't sustain itself for an entire season, and that's kind of my ultimate problem with Concepcion. Again, these are just preliminary rankings. I have not plugged anybody into my Dynasty wide receiver rookie models, but based on film, I don't see the level of prospect that I've seen a lot of Dynasty fantasy football YouTubers have on this type of guy. Malachi Fields as at number 8. This guy's coming out of Notre Dame, and again, a bigger wide receiver that I find very intriguing. I don't think I've seen anyone talk about Malachi Fields, so I'm excited to dive into this guy. I kept finding myself wanting to put this guy in a box when I was watching him on film. I was not able to do that, which is a really intriguing thing because this is the type of guy at his size, 6'4", 223 pounds, you would usually think of as like a great red zone threat and a great 50-50 ball guy. He does have that ability, but this is a guy who fascinates me because he's a really good route runner. It's really weird to have a guy this big be that good at route running. He could beat man coverage and generate separation by using those feet. Once again, not a very common trait for guys of his size. And when he has the ball in his hands, he's really good in space, and good luck bringing the guy down. He really is like a tight end when he has the ball in his hands. Corners, they're not going to be able to bring him down. Obviously, he does have those receiver traits that usually the bigger guys have. Bigger bodied wideout. He can reliably make big plays because of that catching radius and because of how big his frame is. He's very athletic, grabbing tough catches, and after the catch, like I said, the guy is basically unstoppable. I think I can really see this guy being a huge weapon for somebody. I don't really care what the scheme is. I do think this is a guy who can translate to the NFL. I would say the one thing, keep an eye on him potentially switching to tight end because of that size that he has, and I think he'd be good at that too. Either way, I think the bottom line is this is a guy who is an extremely talented pass catcher who has the potential to dominate certain fantasy games. That's the reason I like him over a lot of guys that you've probably heard more about, but that's why I was excited to bring Malachi Fields to the table for everybody. And then I've got Skylar Bell, another guy I haven't heard talked about very much in the Dynasty community, at number 9 to round out this tier. This guy is 6 foot, 185 pounds, coming out of Connecticut. I hope, at least, that's what is going to be accurate when you come around and see him at the Combine. I think this guy is going to be a very interesting development to watch at the NFL Combine because if he is a true 6 foot, This is a guy who could translate to the NFL level very, very well. And what you saw from him in college will translate. Now, I'm not the biggest combine guy for the wide receiver position because I think speed is very overvalued for wide receivers in fantasy football. I think really what it comes to is size, because not that size dictates how good of a player you'll be, but size definitely can dictate what your ceiling will be and how you're used in the NFL level. He played both outside and in the slot at UConn, and he did very well doing both. He's electric with the ball in his hands, and he's got, obviously, a taste for the flashy catches if you watch this guy on film. The hands are very good, the route running is very good, and the dominance after the catch are always traits that I love to see from a wide receiver coming out of college. The fact that he was able to do both on the outside and in the slot gives me a lot of hope that this guy, Skylar Bell, can translate to the NFL level. Again, I will be watching this one very closely, what his size truly is at the NFL Combine, because I believe that will dictate whether or not he will be used on the outside and in the slot of the NFL level. Because if he turns out to be 5'10", 175 pounds, this is a guy that will not be an outside threat very frequently. He will be mostly relegated to slot duties, but that is the reason why I'm very intrigued by what his size will be at the NFL level, because I really do think of this guy as a very intriguing prospect. Now, dropping down to that last tier, I've got Chris Bell of Louisville at number 10, and I think this is a guy you've probably heard of more often than the previous two guys. I don't love Chris Bell, to be honest with you. My first thought watching him is he really does look like a shorter tight end. He's 6'2", 220 pounds. He's very tough to bring down. He's super thick. He's able to catch balls all over the field, and he does flash some speed when in space. And I do think he could be someone's reliable third down wide receiver, but the route running is average. He's not the best after the catch, and he doesn't create much separation at all. This is stuff that just doesn't translate very well to the NFL level. When you can't create separation, again, you can't just rely on size at the NFL level. Most of the times I've seen him, he's like a catch and drop type of guy. Basically, he catches the ball and then someone tackles him right away as soon as he makes the catch. And I think that lack of separation ability for me is what seems to me could limit him in fantasy football terms. I do think he could be a Tim Patrick type of player where he's a reliable possession receiver and a consistent third down option for someone, but I think ultimately he's probably more important to an NFL team rather than he is a fantasy superstar, and that's the reason I've got him at 10. And then Jeremy Bernard at number 11 out of Alabama. You've probably heard of Jeremy more than you've heard of the previous two guys. Jeremy Bernard, 6'1", 204 pounds. Seems to work well within that system over at Alabama, and he can create space for himself. He was used as a motion receiver pretty frequently, and I would say he takes carries pretty well. I think his versatility will be pretty useful for an NFL team, and I do think he's going to be a good player at the NFL level. That being said, though, I didn't see any traits that really stand out with Jeremy. He is one of those types of guys that does most things pretty good, but nothing really great. I'm definitely going to watch him more because I think I might be overlooking something because people seem to like this guy more than me. I do need to watch more film on this guy, but as of right now, I see him as a more moderately impactful fantasy player with no real potential to be a huge contributor in fantasy football. And again, these rankings are all based on fantasy value, and I just don't see tremendous amounts with any of these guys in this tier right here. And then I've got Chris Brazell at number 12 to round out this whole thing. And Chris Brazell, I will say, more of an intriguing player to me as well. 6'5", 200 pounds. He kind of fits the mold of several other bigger wide receivers where he does some things that most bigger wide receivers don't do. Like he was a possession receiver on shorter routes when you needed a first down. That's typically not something you see from a 6'5" guy. He was really big in those areas. It is important to note that he wasn't really torching corners with like crisp routes or anything like that. Most of the damage was done in soft zone coverage. He's also good at using his size to box out defenders in the red zone, which again, something I appreciate because not everyone using that size uses it to their advantage. He is a very reliable target almost anywhere on the field, with strong hands, and I would say he makes the tough catches look pretty easy. But his route running and his run after the catch ability, it just leaves a lot to be desired on the field, man. I don't mean it as an insult, but I do see him as more of a Devon Vele type of player. I really don't mean it as an insult. I think he's someone who can be a very valuable guy and have some big games in moments when the team schemes plays for him, but ultimately, I do really view his ceiling as being relatively capped. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below, and if you want to see the top 15 overall prospects for 2026 rookie class, click on this video right here.